Stories from the Growing Years by Arleta Richardson. A note from the author. The questions most often asked by readers of the Grandma's Attic stories are the people real? Are the stories true? Yes, the people lived. The stories are as true as I can make them. Though the books are listed as fiction, they contain much that is biographical. The real Mabel, my maternal grandmother, was born in 1873 in a log cabin in northern Michigan. She was the third of 13 children, 3 of whom died at birth and 2 more in childhood. Her sister Violet, born when Mabel was 20, became a part of my life. She provided hours of fun and memories of the family that were invaluable to the Grandma's Attic stories. I located the fictitious village of North Branch in the vicinity of West Branch and North Bradley, Michigan. The characters outside Mabel's immediate family are typical of the friends and neighbors who lived in the area. Logging was a primary industry, and the fires, tornadoes, epidemics, and accidents did happen. Leonard and Mabel had 3 children who were actually born at 5-year intervals. Alma, my mother, arrived in 1903. Claire in 1908, and Clarabelle in 1913. The years of Grandma's growing up and young adulthood were the halcyon days of America. Between the Civil War and World War I, there was comparative peace throughout the land. People sought new ways to live and new places to develop. The majority of people lived in rural or small-town communities like North Branch. The benefits of modern technology were slow to reach those areas and sometimes slower to be accepted. From the vantage point of automatic and instant everything, we wonder where Grandma found the hours to cook, clean, launder, garden, care for children, and maintain her sanity. During the 1920s and 30s, Mabel found herself living in the city caring for Alma's daughter, me, as well as for her own youngest child. Those were years of travel and new experiences for her, and although changes in morals and ethics during those times disturbed and perplexed her, she held faithfully to the standards on which her life was built and continued to pray for her children and grandchildren. Mabel's devotion and dreams centered around her family and church. If asked, she would have said that her life was very ordinary and uneventful, certainly nothing that could become the subject of a book. She possessed a love and appreciation for God, for people, for beauty, and for ridiculous situations. Of course, Mabel had her share of unhappy circumstances, days of despair and depression, sleepless nights and periods of grief, disappointment, and deep sorrow. She worried about her children when she was left to rear them alone after Len's death, and, at the end of her life, rested on the faith that is the evidence of things not seen, that she would meet them in heaven. These were threads woven through the fabric that gave her, as Sarah Jane said to me, a common bond with all mankind. This same fabric, tied with prayer and the absolute belief in God's control over her life, influenced me to follow the ways of the Lord rather than to seek the pleasures of the world for a season. As the grandchild most often in Mabel's care, I received the benefits of her loving wisdom and discipline as well as the fun of reading together, hearing the family tales that made up the Grandma's Attic stories, and observing firsthand a life devoted to God. When one lives 90 years, what things stand out in the memory as important milestones? If the Grandma's Attic stories are any indication, it is not the earth-shaking, history-making events that are lived over and talked about decades later, but the everyday happenings that change the course of our lives without our being aware that they are doing so. It's the first lesson learned about the dire consequences of dishonesty, the compassion shown by a friend at a time of need, the mistakes we make, the hilarious incidents shared with family and friends. All these things are intensely personal. This is not to lessen the significance of history in the world, but to point out that our lives are held together with the important, only to us, events and people that most of the world has never heard about. Without them, our lives would be bleak, indeed. One of the rewards of recalling Grandma's stories is the number of letters that come telling me how much readers enjoy the books. One letter, perhaps my favorite, began, "Dear Grandma's Attic, are you still alive?" Yes, Grandma's Attic is alive. Grandma in heaven and I on earth, still living and looking forward to being together again very soon. Arleta Richardson, August 1990.